Welcome back. You're listening to Ask the CIO, sponsored by Thundercat Technology and NetApp on federalnewsradio.com and 1500 AM. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guest today is Ken Rogers, the acting deputy CIO of Business Management and Planning at the State Department. Ken, before break, we were talking about data and the importance of getting data accessible and making sure people can get through the complexity of a potential multi-cloud approach. But the most important thing about data, of course, is security, and you brought that up a little bit. So let's start with security. And one of my favorite topics in the government is the Continuous Diagnostics and Mitigation, the CDM program. In many ways, the State Department was the reason why we have CDM today. Maybe give us an update of how you guys are doing around security, specifically around CDM.
So I'll back up a little bit on our security. We're really looking at our data security, infrastructure security, and our cloud security. So what we're doing in the cloud as we build this ecosystem is securing those environments. So as we add capability into the cloud, that SaaS layer capability is leveraging the security controls already in place. This is really critical to decrease that threat vector, increase the security controls, or put in the right security controls for those platforms, and decreasing the need for each capability to do their own thing on security, really creating some cost efficiencies of how we're securing our data, leveraging that in the cloud environment, inheriting those controls. So what that means is when I add a new capability, I do an assessment of that data going into that environment, and I do a notice of change into that ATO for that environment, and I've really increased time to market while guaranteeing control of the data, securing the data that's there. We continue to expand on our CDM program, monitoring, identifying our risk, and making sure that we have the right tools in place to do that. So, and that kind of ties into a lot of what we're doing in partnership with DHS is looking at our trusted internet connection. One of the biggest challenges we have is in compliance with that program is backhauling our data through the current legacy TIC infrastructure, and then trying to maintain some level of performance for our customers in 190 or so locations around the globe. So how do we move into the 21st century in terms of that monitoring and making sure things are operating in the right way across our global network environment? And so that requires us looking at what kind of monitoring capability do our cloud service providers have, and focusing with bated breath, of course, on new guidance from OMB on how we can leverage tools that are out there to create a better user experience, improve performance across the department globally, and monitor the traffic and the business that's happening across our environment.
You bring up the TIC and the new policy from OMB. We too in the media are waiting for OMB to deliver on that new policy, hopefully soon, the ubiquitous soon in government. Maybe talk a little bit about the communications you're having with DHS and what kind of conversations are you having? I know we know that the Small Business Administration did a TIC pilot. I know several other agencies have done a TIC pilot. What are you hoping to gain from those experiences and from your work with DHS?
So, we're a part of pushing a pilot into the MGT Act. We're glad there are, I think, 3 initiatives currently underway for modernizing the TIC, and we're really looking to how those new pilots could create a value proposition for the department, leverage some of the existing capabilities as a service. We continue to work closely with DHS and have those conversations about an overseas TIC or cloud integrated TIC or regional TIC. There are a number of ways to slice that, and so, of course, we're looking to how we can leverage what's coming out of this next round of pilots. We absolutely have to address this from a global perspective. We've had numerous conversations with DoD as well on how they have structured their environment around the globe. So they're a good partner providing best practices that we can leverage as we explore how we're going to deploy our network, our global network, which in fact does provide that access and capability to a whole of government approach for those agencies that are on location with us overseas.
I know there'll be plenty more to talk about as we head into the fall, so we'll follow up more with you on that. The other piece of cyber that you mentioned is risk, and I want to go down that path a little bit because understanding your risks has been a big focus area from OMB, from DHS. So maybe talk a little bit about the risk-based approach you guys are taking to balance security, access, mission, and all those needs, specifically cloud data as it relates back to the cloud and data.
So we have launched this year a risk management program that's tied into the broader enterprise risk management program. We've got the cyber piece under the Office of CIO, and so we're building out a framework for leveraging a lot of what NIST has done for that risk management approach. There are kind of three tenets, though, when you look at cyber risk. There's the investment side of cyber, there's the mission or performance side of cyber, and then there's the security side of cyber. If you lock down your systems and capability to the extent that the user can't use it for their mission, they'll find less secure ways of doing it. So how do we balance that out and make sure we have a holistic look at our systems, our investments, and the security controls that we're putting in place, so we have an overarching risk posture that we're managing to, and at all levels of the organization, so that we can make informed IT decisions about the kind of technology we're leveraging and how we're leveraging that. I already mentioned, the supply chain issue. That's a big piece of addressing risk as we move forward with the hardware and software buys that we do, and there's obviously a need to continue to do that.
One of the things when we talk about risk, and you went through the three: investment, mission performance, and then the security side of it. Are you guys measuring it in some way? Is there some way you're saying, how do we make that balance of how much money do we spend? What's the impact on mission performance? And then how much security do we need based on the risk we see or we expect to see? How do you kind of make those decisions?
Yeah, it's a great question. So one of the things that we've been working aggressively to do is get our arms around the total cybersecurity portfolio across the whole department. So there's direct and indirect cybersecurity spend. There's what each system or application is spending on that system level control, encryption, data at rest. There's that piece of it. And so that's decentralized across the department. So how do we get accurate figures associated with how each system is doing the cybersecurity at that level? Obviously, as we've talked, there's a whole push to do that data layer security. And so there'll be new costs associated with data layer security and the credentialing and moving those systems into our IDMS effort. And then there is the direct security that we're doing with the network and utilities across our infrastructure. And then the final piece is the information assurance and the threat assessment and monitoring, leveraging the mass amounts of data that we're getting through our monitoring at multiple levels, endpoint as well as our core environment. So that get our arms around that complete portfolio and really assess that from as new products are coming in. How do we determine, it's not just determining the value of that single product that we could use, but how does that product fit into the cybersecurity architecture, and that risk framework and the total portfolio? Can we bring in a new product and get rid of three and integrate the new product into that architecture, so we're actually securing our environment at a lower cost because we're creating that level of optimization?
Ken, this has been a fascinating conversation. Unfortunately, we're just about out of time. We could talk obviously much longer. There's plenty going on at State Department. But before I let you go, let's talk about vendors real quick. I know a lot of vendors listen to the program and they're very interested in how they could help you help us help you, or whatever they want to do. So maybe talk a little bit about what advice do you have for vendors? How as you guys move into this cloud and shared services world, what's your expectations from them?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, moving to the cloud and shared services is a paradigm shift. It affects our civil service workforce, our foreign service workforce, and of course our contractor workforce. So as we've kind of looked at this paradigm shift, we're moving up the stack. We're no longer, buy, build, and maintain. We're moving up to that SaaS layer. So how do we do what is cloud native applications or cloud native capabilities, and how can the private sector, the commercial sector, support us as we move up the stack and bring value at that SaaS layer? That's number one. Number two, when you look at what's happening with the cloud, you've got a refresh cycle two times a year, maybe 3 times a year. It's no longer this 3-4 year wait for refresh cycle on operating systems. So it necessitates 10% to zero code. How do I use stuff out of the box? How do I change business process reengineering to leverage the capabilities that are there? In implementing the right kind of discipline that brings value to us, not butts and seats, but value at that SaaS layer. And then the third is that agile piece that I talked about. This is understanding the business requirements and delivering capability in increments, leveraging the platforms that are there, and then building on that is going to be key for us as we go forward. As we reveal our cloud strategy and build out that ecosystem, it'll be obvious to industry what platforms are there and what gaps are there. So we will clearly need increased capability from the vendor community at platform expertise, infrastructure expertise, so that we can manage those cloud environments in an effective way. And understanding that there's going to be an increased need for inherently governmental in some areas, and then a change in the kind of vendor support we're going to need on-prem as we make this journey of modernizing our IT environment into the cloud space.
All right, Ken, a lot going on. Great advice. I really appreciate your time today, but unfortunately, we are out of time. Let me thank my guest, Ken Rogers, the Acting Deputy Chief Information Officer for Business Management and Planning at the State Department. Ken, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
I'm Jason Miller, and you've been listening to Ask the CIO, sponsored by Thundercat Technology and NetApp on federalnewsradio.com at 1500 AM. For more in this discussion, visit askthecio.com. On behalf of Federal News Radio, thank you for joining us. A link to the archive session will be sent to you shortly. This concludes our webinar. Thank you for attending.